Hello and welcome to Markets Daily, hosted by me, Jen Sanasi. On this show, we navigate the currents shaping the crypto markets, providing insights against the broader financial landscape. So, whether you're actively trading or simply fascinated by the volatility that is the crypto markets, this show is your compass to understanding what's happened, where we are, and where we're going. On today's show, we are joined by Bitstamp USA CEO and Chief Commercial Officer, Bobby Zagotta. Bobby, how's it going?
It's going great. Great to be here, Jen.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. It has been an absolutely insane week for crypto markets, and I guess that came on the back of some other very turbulent news in the last week. Talk to me about what you've been watching.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you're referring to, but no, I'm kidding, of course. Yeah, incredible news coming out of the election. And I think many people anticipated that if the administration changed, it would support crypto markets and Bitcoin pricing. But I'm not sure if everyone anticipated to the extent that it has created a bona fide market rally, which is quite exciting. Now, there's a couple of other macro factors that I think are in play here. I always tune into 6 months post halving. 6 months post halving usually also, for whatever reason, creates momentum, and then these things all conspire together to get more people into the markets, which is exciting.
Well, that's interesting. Let's put the election aside and look at 6 months post halving. I know when the halving happened, there were a lot of charts out there, a lot of folks looking at comparisons to previous halvings. If we take the elections out of the narrative for just a second, we're 6 months post halving, we're going into 2025. What do you expect to see given the halvings that have happened in the past?
Yeah, I expect to see continued and sustained growth for the next few quarters anyway. Why do I say that? It's really driven, I think, by increased institutional involvement, and that's of course driven by several factors, not the least of which is ETFs. So, just cannot understate the importance of Bitcoin ETFs and ETH ETFs in the marketplace today. It has a familiarity for institutions and retail investors that have unlocked a whole new set and segment of participants. And that just continues to grow, I think. And as that money flows into the ecosystem, that creates more opportunities, more volume, more trading opportunities and investing opportunities. So that's been a really important piece of the puzzle, in addition to this kind of 6 month phenomenon post halving. And then institutional involvement today continues to grow. So this week at Bitstamp, our corporate onboarding was 60% higher than last week. Last week was 50% higher than the week before. There's real interest by institutions, and not just trading companies, but hedge funds, asset managers, more traditional financial services companies, that they finally perhaps have a level of confidence to participate fully.
Does that level of confidence come from the result of the election?
I think in the U.S., it's pretty significantly tied to the election. So in the U.S., the regulatory environment, as you know, has been a little unclear and or confusing. So, different regulatory bodies, perhaps battling for jurisdiction, and lots of mixed signals is the way I view it. And so with this election, there is the anticipation of a clearer code of law, a clear set of regulations, and for companies like Bitstamp and many in the ecosystem, we just want to do everything correctly, everything right, and make sure we're the safest possible place to access these markets. Now, it's different outside of the U.S. In Europe, for example, they are ahead of the U.S. in terms of achieving some level of regulatory clarity, specifically the MiCA framework in the EU, as an example. But in the U.S., this is a real catalyst tied to the administration change.
I mean, speaking of all these catalysts, I'm sure you saw Bitcoin's now become the seventh largest asset by market cap, overtaking oil giant Saudi Aramco. It's kind of unbelievable to read when you think about how old Bitcoin is and how young, I guess, this industry is. talk to me about what that means for you and how you put that in context. I mean, when you're talking to some of these institutions.
Yeah, I'm glad you highlighted that because sometimes in the day-to-day, marketplace, you kind of lose sight of how far the cryptocurrency phenomenon has become. I've been in this space full time for 6 years now, and just earlier this year when the campaigns were starting to focus a bit on Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, I was telling many of my colleagues this was unimaginable even just a year or two ago that it would be a bona fide campaign issue. And then to your point, now it's become mainstream, so it's acceptable. It's not a bad word. It's not only or solely associated with, some of the darker parts of its history in the early days. And then we sometimes forget that in other jurisdictions, in the U.S. it can be quite recreational, but in Venezuela or other developing countries in Africa, this blockchain technology and the ability to control your own destiny in terms of how you manage your money or your wealth it's a lifeline. It's not recreation. It's truly a new path that can really improve society.
It really is incredible. I mean, I was in Argentina doing some reporting recently, and just seeing how embedded different cryptocurrencies, I guess in Argentina, it's more stable coins, are into the everyday lives of people is just incredible. Like you said, here it's almost a novelty. If you know, it's not as mainstream, but there it has already really kind of embedded into the lives and are solving real problems. It was really incredible to see.
Yeah, that's a great example because in certain areas of the world, the citizens who work hard their whole lives, they make some level of money, but they can't really trust their institutions to the extent that we sometimes take for granted in the U.S. And so stablecoins is a perfect example. And stablecoins, as you know, is just a super active part of the ecosystem right now. It is a killer app of sorts, and is really creating new opportunities. And there's a proliferation of new projects and possibilities across currencies, not just USD today.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where stablecoins go. I agree with you. I think it is the killer use case here. Now, as we head towards the end of the year, towards 2025, a lot of folks who are investing or thinking about investing watch this show. If you're thinking about allocating a portfolio, what does that look like to you if you're looking at a good balance across different crypto assets or crypto and traditional assets?
Well, Jen, I would never give investing advice.
That's why I framed the
That's
question like that.
certainly certainly not my role. But how I'll tell you how I think about it. So, it's not too dissimilar from the equities marketplace. You kind of have your blue chips and your large caps, and you have your mid caps, and then you have more risk assets. And so that's the way I think about it. And so, for me personally, Bitcoin in particular, to me is a blue chip kind of asset. It's got such tremendous AUM and acceptance around the world, and it also has some unique features that make it, I think, quite valuable. The scarcity component and the pure independence of the protocol. But then there's a lot of very interesting, let's call them mid cap or mid tier token opportunities that have really interesting use cases attached to them and are getting a lot of momentum. So tokens like Solana and Avalanche, and Sui and Cardano and Polkadot, there's quite a range of really interesting technology and therefore protocols that are getting traction. So when I think about portfolio, to me, 50% is the large caps, and then 50% is a combination of mid and more emerging opportunities. And in this marketplace, meme tokens have become quite interesting too. So I view those as kind of riskier bets perhaps, but interesting markets.
Meme tokens are really kind of driving this bull run, as we spoke about it on Markets Daily recently. Is Is that a surprising narrative to you? Like, what do you make of this, like, massive interest in meme currencies right now?
It is a bit surprising, to be honest. You know, there's always or historically there's been a phenomenon with a bull market that altcoins in general do very well, and they start to balance against the what we were referring to as large caps earlier, you know, Bitcoin and ETH. So that's not surprising. But the meme tokens in general have captured a lot of people's imagination. And you know, I think speculation is, you know, one of one of the great American pastimes. You know, if it's not cryptos, it's other types of asset classes that people like to understand the markets and make bets, and see, you know, see what they can learn and see what they can achieve. So I think that's what's happening in the meme token space. But to answer your question directly, I am a bit surprised that they're getting so much attention and so much traction right now.
I know I have to just point out one Peanut surpassed $1 billion market cap in less than 2 weeks. It is kind of wild to see. It feels like we're heading to towards a pretty epic bull run. But again, I don't have a crystal ball, so who knows what's going to
Yeah.
happen next year. We're talking about this market euphoria. Talk to me, just given your experience, you've been in this industry for a long time. Is there anything folks should be wary of amongst all of this euphoria and excitement?
Well, I would say a couple of things. You know, first of all, like any marketplace, there are cycles, and there's long-term views and there's short-term views. And you know, my personal view is that the Bitcoin market in particular and cryptocurrencies in general is a long-term play, if you will, and opportunity. So there will be, this is you know, an exuberant market at the moment. There will be some corrections, but in general, you know, I can't give any investment advice to anyone, but from my standpoint, the trend is kind of undeniable if you look over the course of a few years, and I think it will continue for a few years. So I would say take a long-term view, and don't be rattled by short-term cycles. That's part of any market, whether it's Tesla or Apple or Bitcoin. So that's what I try to emphasize with my friends and family, and any asset class is a risk vehicle, if you will. So allocate your portfolio appropriately. You should really only allocate a portion that you're comfortable dealing with market cycles.
All right, and the last thing I want to touch on is something that you brought up at the beginning. Obviously, regulation is a big theme as we head into 2025 under a new administration here in the United States. I know that Bitstamp USA is very obviously focused on following the law, being compliant, as are other crypto firms that operate in the United States. Talk to me about what you expect to see from a regulatory standpoint in 2025, and how that might affect how the markets react, but also how crypto continues to develop here in North America.
Yeah, well, as you can imagine, we follow this very, very closely. You know, Bitstamp, as you may know, is the longest running crypto exchange, founded in 2011. We were the first exchange ever to get a regulatory license back in 2016. We were the first exchange to start getting global financial audits from a Big Four accounting firm. We've been doing that for 8 years. We've invested heavily in compliance and being a leader, if you will, in terms of creating a safe way to participate for institutions and for retail investors. And so we've worked closely with legislators, not just in the U.S., but around the world. We've tried to shape policy. We've tried to, create clarity. And from our standpoint, as I alluded to before, you know, we just want better clarity in the U.S. You know, tell us the rules. We will do it immaculately, as will others, and ensure that it's safe. We all have the same objective. So what do I anticipate? You know, I'm hopeful that with the change in administration, it will unlock some of the blockers that I perceive have been in place that have made it impossible to advance legislation. that will provide a framework of law that regulators, the SEC, the CFTC in particular, can then, create rulemaking out of, and have clarity of jurisdiction. So I think that will be how it plays out versus kind of a rulemaking by enforcement approach and trying to guess what the courts are going to do. So that's what I anticipate, and that's what I'm hoping for. But I think we'll see in the next 100 days or so.
Bobby, thanks so much for joining Markets Daily. It was a pleasure.
Great to see you, Jen. Thanks.
And to our audience who's watching at home, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoy Markets Daily or any other of our podcasts on the CoinDesk Podcast Network, just subscribe to the CoinDesk Podcast Network. That is available on all podcast platforms. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Give us a thumbs up. It was wonderful chatting with you today. We'll see you tomorrow.